So from my flowchart, I have a program here that's called Mars. So I have my comment header and my shebang, just like I would normally do. And I have this part, which we will get to eventually. I have my main function here. And once again, I have input, process, and output. So here's my input. I'm getting the distance. And remember from last time, when we use input, we're getting back a string. So notice when I hover over that, the IDE is telling me the thing that I'm being passed back is a string. But I don't want a string, I want a number. I want an integer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that string to an integer, and we're going to get back an integer. Okay? So we get the user to give us keyboard input, we convert it to an integer, and we assign, remember that's not an equal sign, it's an assignment statement, we assign it to our variable distance. I then take distance and I divide it by, this is the value for speed of light, and I assign this answer, I assign it to this variable. And then I just take the time and I print it out. Notice here, I'm just going to print out 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's what the formatting is. And I'm also telling the user back the distance that they gave me. And then it just prints out done. So if I grab this and pull it up, run my program, notice I'm telling the person what the average distance is, just so that they could like type that in. And it tells you that it would take you that many seconds to get from Earth to Mars if we're at the average distance and you happen to be traveling at the speed of light, which obviously we can't. Okay, so that's how the program works. Turns out that we have one problem, and the problem is this thing. So it's really bad practice to have what is called magical numbers floating in your program. So we know that that happens to be the speed of light, right? But if somebody was just looking at this equation, okay, this part didn't happen to be there, they were just looking at this part of the program, because maybe there's like thousands of lines of code and this is just a little chunk, and someone says like, there's a problem with this, I need you to fix it. And they're looking at this and they're like, distance is divided by, like, where is that number coming from? Now, you could put a comment here. And that would be better. Oh, look, it even wants to tell me it's meters per second, which it is. So that would be a lot better. Then when someone looks at that, they're like, oh, okay, now I know what's going on. But the speed of light is actually a really special number. It's not a variable, like this can change, that could change, right? This number, does the speed of light ever change? No. So it's not a variable, it's a, say it again? Constant. It's a constant. So if it's a constant, we should actually declare it as a constant, okay? So that somebody doesn't come by here and go, oh, wait a minute, no, it's like this number. You're like, well, that's not the speed of light, okay? They've messed up. Somebody could go into your program and change this number by accident, and then the whole calculation gets messed up. So there's a couple ways we could do this. We could do something like this. It turns out that if we're going to declare, put this into a memory location, normally what we do is we declare the variable up at the top here. Okay, so let's say and look, it even did that for me. So it turns out that that's better because now we're just dealing with variables here, and the person can't change this. They would have to go up here and change it, and maybe we do speed of light. So now it's defined at the top. We know what it is, and if we run this program again, nothing hopefully has changed. Okay, so we still get the same answer, so we're good. So this is a nicer way of doing things, but it's still not a constant. At this point, speed of light is still a variable, right? Somebody could do something like this. I don't want it. There we go. Somebody could do something like that. So when this line of code runs, it's going to take the value of speed of light, add 10 to it, and then overwrite what was there. So this isn't going to be correct. So I'm just going to make it like really big so that we get some ridiculous answer. So now this is wrong. So we need some kind of way to say, wait a minute, when we declare this thing, I want it to be a true constant, so that if somebody tries to do something silly like this, the IDE is going to warn us. Okay, it's going to say, wait a minute, you told me speed of light was a constant. You're not allowed to change that. So there's several ways you could do this. Just going to go back here, and we're going to talk about so in computer science, a constant is something where we're like saving a variable, but it doesn't want to vary. We want to make it a constant. And we don't want to let any user be able to change that value in memory. Once we set it, we're never going to be able to change it. Okay? We normally declare them at the top of our function or our program, so that if that value, which seems kind of weird, does change, then we can just go to one place and change it. So an example of a constant that did change once is the tax that we pay in Ontario, HST. So it turned out that currently when we buy something, the HST is 13%. So several decades ago, it was actually 14%. And the government at the time, when there was an election, they said, like, if you vote us in, we're going to lower the taxes by 1%, and they got in, and they actually lowered it. So when that happened, the computers that were like at the grocery store, somebody had to change the software. And if you wrote your program so that there was just a magical number sitting there, maybe that magical number, that 13%, was like several places in your program. So some programmer had to go through and find all those magical 13% and change them. And most likely you missed one, or you didn't do 13, you left it as 14, or you made a mistake and put 12 or something. So it's way better that you would declare the variable, or in this case the constant, once right at the top. Then when HST changed, you go into the program, you find the one spot where it exists, change it, and you know the entire program works. Okay? So constant in computer science terms is either a value that never changes or something that could change but is very infrequent. In C++ or C, there's actually this reserved word that you can put at the top. So if you've done any C programming, you know that before we declare the variable, or before we use the variable, you have to declare it. And if you put this const in front, so say constant int and then the variable name, then nobody could ever change this again. once it's assigned a value once, you can never change it again. You'll also notice something about the name. What's different about the naming convention? It's all capitals. And that's done purposely so that it sticks out like a sore thumb. So that when you're looking at a variable or a memory location, if it's all in capital letters, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I should not be touching that. So if we go back to our program now, this thing probably should be called this. Okay, that is a way better description of what's going on, so that if somebody comes down here and sees that variable, they know right away, oh, it's not really a variable, that's a constant, I should not be touching it. Turns out, unlike C, where we have this constant, Python doesn't have that. So what do? So in Python, you actually create a completely separate file, normally called constants.py. And you place your constants in that file. And then in your program, you have to import this file, and then you can say constants dot, and it will go back and use this. Okay? So in Python, even there is no constants keyword, you can't sort of do this. Okay? That doesn't exist. That's why there's a red line here. Okay? That doesn't exist. And just because I've made them all capitals doesn't mean that I can't do something silly like this. Okay, you still could do something like that. Now notice over here. So it says it doesn't conform to snake case. So it's not conforming to snake case because remember, snake case was all small letters. Okay? But we're purposely doing this so that it sticks out. So that's okay that we're getting this error. So this would still run, even though we know it's a bad program. So just by capitalizing it, that doesn't make it a constant in Python. What we need to do is we need to create a whole new file. I'm just going to go up here. Now, technically it doesn't have to be legally called constants, but normally we do. And I'm just going to put the name in there. Okay? Now I'm going to come back here, and right after our comment, I'm going to use the import keyword, and I'm going to import constants. So I'm going to go and grab this Python file, and all its information is going to get shoved into memory as soon as we go here. So we no longer need this because that's in our Python constants file. And here, you will notice there's an error. So to be able to access this, we type constants and then dot. Whoops, go away. And when we hit dot, it goes back here and it knows this exists, and that's why we get that IntelliSense saying, hey, I think you mean this. Okay? So Python is slightly different from virtually every other programming language. If you look at the document or the textbook here for constants, Python requires a different file. Remember, C just had this reserved word. C# also has this reserved word. Java has a way of doing constants. Virtually every other programming language has a way of creating constants. the guy that created Python, he decided that that wasn't going to be a thing. Okay, so the only way you can do it is by putting it in another file. So if I run this now, you'll notice it still works. And if I try to do something silly, like something like this, I actually, if I ran this, it wouldn't work, okay? Because this program can't go and change a value in another file. It wouldn't work.